Outside of Bengal, there is a little tin shack. Inside, if you pay a man a single rupee, you can meet the human ape. The human ape will be sitting on a little mound of pillows and is completely covered in hair from head to foot. Once, when I was traveling through Bengal, I had the opportunity to meet this fine gentleman, who really does resemble an ape in the face. He was most polite and related the strange story of how he came to be so lonely and despised in his native town. It seems he was born a strange, hairy infant, and that from the day of his birth he was regarded with some suspicion by the other villagers. They apparently saw the deformity as a curse as well as an omen, and took pains to shun him whenever they could. He lived a lonely, sheltered existence away from the other children, and was mostly kept hidden by his family, who no doubt loved him despite his unusual appearance. In time, circus promoters came calling with offers of lavish wealth, and it was all his poor family could do to resist the temptation to send him away. He grew to manhood with all the usual yearnings and desires, but perhaps I should let him tell the story in the way he related it to me while sitting upon his mound of cushions, swatting at flies. I was born looking like an ape, and the other villagers hated the sight of me. They thought that I was monstrous, and they made no bones about disliking me. A group of them felt I should be sent away to live with the monks, but my mother and father flatly refused, and I was left alone. Little good it did me. I was blamed for every single misfortune that ever befell the village, and in time it got to be so that the other children threw rocks and taunted me when they saw me coming, so that I could not go to school. Things went on like this for many years, until I reached manhood. My appearance at this point became so horrendous that I was forced to go around the streets wearing a great cloak and a veil, so as not to disturb the villagers who, at any rate, still hated the sight of me. I spent much time alone, walking the roads around our village, and in time I came to a pathway that led through a park, a beautiful place where the flowers bloomed radiantly and where I finally felt I might find some peace. It was here, sitting on an old stone bench, that I first saw the beautiful young woman that stole my heart from me and made me yearn for her soft kisses and gentle ways. She was sitting under a parasol, and I quickly crept behind her, through the bushes, so that I could be near her and smell her perfumed scent. I didn't know what to do, though, so that first day I merely watched her, and then, when she got up to leave, I waited and crept out of the bushes, following at a great distance. I was careful to memorize the location of the park and the old bench, as I realized even then that I would return again and again to steal a glimpse of her. The next time I saw her, she seemed even more radiantly lovely than before, and I crept closer to her in the bushes, liking her smell and delighting in her beautiful appearance. She unknowingly fanned a little of her perfume scent my way, and I found the smell to be intoxicating. Before I even knew what I was doing, I had crept forward so that my shadow fell upon her form, and she turned around. She was clearly startled, but she could not see me well as I was still hidden. "My, you've really thrown quite a fright into me," she said, and continued to fan herself while turning and trying to make out my form through the thick foliage. "Forgive me," I said. "I was only trying to steal a glimpse of a most rare and wondrous flower. Now that I have seen it, I shall be going." She then replied, "Well, why don't you come and sit near me, and we'll keep each other company? It is such a lonely day, and such a hot one. I would dearly love to have some company while I enjoy the beauty of this garden." I felt my heart grow cold, and I told her plainly I could not. Suddenly, however, an idea flashed in my mind, and I said, "I would like, though, if I may, to sing you some little poems I have devised, as you may find that they enhance the beauty of this place, and make your day seem full of wonder and merriment." And so I began to sing my poems, and she found them to be exceedingly lovely, and after a few days of my singing to her from the shadows of the bush, she began to press me harder to come and sit with her, which, of course, I knew I could not do, even covered by my cloak and strange hood. However, on that fateful final day, I sang to her a poem so lovely that it made her nearly weep, and she got up from the bench for the first time, and came around to the shadows, and took hold of my figure as I cowered behind the trunk of a great tree. She seemed surprised to see how small I was, and she said, "So that is where have you been hiding all this time? How dare you deceive me? Why, you're not much bigger than a child." Before I could make a move to stop her, she reached up and yanked off my hood. I stood there speechless, and suddenly her hand flew to her face, and she screamed, and her eyes seemed to roll up inside of her head until I could see the whites. Then she toppled over, dead from fright. I learned later, during my trial, that she had been a young woman with a very bad heart, and that she spent her afternoons in the garden as a way to soothe her nerves. I was acquitted of the murder, of course. They didn't have a leg to stand on, as I had never even touched her. It was her own sense of shock at my hideous appearance, that caused her to suddenly expire. And how could I be blamed for such a thing, really? Well, there was quite a bit of outrage aimed at myself because of this incident. So when Banji came and offered me a job in his sideshow, I readily accepted, even though it meant saying goodbye to my mother and father and the rest of my clan. I could no longer suffer the enmity of the villagers, so I traveled to all the most remote provinces to exhibit myself, and did quite well in that regard. After he had finished speaking, a young boy carried in a plate of food, which I saw was mostly vegetarian. I thought I might ask him a few questions, for, as a reporter, I am always curious to know what life is like for the unfortunate who somehow manage to carry on in spite of things. Yet, when I opened my mouth, I realized that few words would come forth, so that I found myself simply asking whether or not he was in any pain, to which he promptly replied, "No." I left the tin shack a little mystified, as he genuinely seemed to be content with his place in the world, and I didn't sense the slightest taint of bitterness or resentment about him. I continued my travels in Bengal, but have seldom met such an intriguing gentleman as the Human Ape.